A millionaire's public humiliation of his pregnant wife seemed like the end of their story. But 4 years later, an unexpected twist of fate forced them to confront their past. What happened next will shock you, revealing the true power of time. In this gripping story, you'll discover how life's biggest mistakes can lead to its greatest lessons. The Grand Ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with the glitter of New York City's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. At the center of it all stood Jack Sterling, real estate mogul and the evening's guest of honor, his charismatic smile never wavering as he worked the room. Jack, darling, a statuesque blonde in a crimson dress sashayed towards him, champagne flute in hand. Fabulous party. You've outdone yourself this time. Vanessa, Jack murmured, his eyes darting around the room. Where's Marta? His assistant's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Your wife? I believe I saw her near the bar. Shall I fetch her for you? Before Jack could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. He turned to see Marta, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that accentuated her swollen belly, making her way towards him. Her eyes, usually warm and inviting, now blazed with an intensity that made Jack's stomach churn. Jack, Marta said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. We need to talk. Now. He plastered on a smile, aware of the curious glances from nearby guests. Of course, darling. What's on your mind? Marta's gaze flickered to Vanessa, who hovered nearby, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. In private, Jack. Now, Jack chuckled, his tone condescending. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. We're all friends, aren't we? The silence that followed was deafening. Marta's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back, squaring her shoulders. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know about your affair, Jack. With her... She jerked her chin towards Vanessa, who had the decency to look away. The room erupted in hushed whispers. Jack felt the weight of 100 stares boring into him. His heart raced, panic rising in his throat. He had two choices, deny everything or go on the offensive. In a split second, he made his decision. An affair? He scoffed, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Marta, darling, you're being ridiculous. Perhaps the hormones are affecting your judgment. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Marta recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. How dare you? She hissed, tears now flowing freely. I've seen the texts, Jack, the hotel receipts. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Jack's facade cracked. Anger flashed in his eyes as he leaned in close, his words meant only for Marta. You want to do this here? Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with Vanessa. And you know why? Because she doesn't nag me. She doesn't make me feel trapped. She makes me feel alive. The venom in his voice shocked even him. He watched as something broke inside Marta, her face crumpling in pain and humiliation. Without another word, she turned and fled the ballroom, leaving behind a wake of stunned silence. As the gravity of what he'd done settled over him, Jack felt a hand on his arm. Vanessa stood beside him, a triumphant gleam in her eye. The Grand Ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with the glitter of New York City's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. At the center of it all stood Jack Sterling, real estate mogul and the evening's guest of honor, his charismatic smile never wavering as he worked the room. Jack, darling. A statuesque blonde in a crimson dress sashayed towards him, champagne flute in hand. Fabulous party. You've outdone yourself this time. Vanessa, Jack murmured, his eyes darting around the room. Where's Marta? His assistant's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Your wife? I believe I saw her near the bar. Shall I fetch her for you? Before Jack could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. He turned to see Marta, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that accentuated her swollen belly, making her way towards him. Her eyes, usually warm and inviting, now blazed with an intensity that made Jack's stomach churn. Jack, Marta said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. We need to talk, now. He plastered on a smile, aware of the curious glances from nearby guests. Of course, darling. What's on your mind? Marta's gaze flickered to Vanessa, who hovered nearby, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. In private, Jack. Now, Jack chuckled, his tone condescending. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. We're all friends, aren't we? The silence that followed was deafening. Marta's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back, squaring her shoulders. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know about your affair, Jack. With her." She jerked her chin towards Vanessa, who had the decency to look away. The room erupted in hushed whispers. Jack felt the weight of 100 stares boring into him. His heart raced, panic rising in his throat. He had two choices: deny everything or go on the offensive. In a split second, he made his decision. "An affair?" he scoffed, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Marta, darling, you're being ridiculous. Perhaps the hormones are affecting your judgment." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Marta recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "How dare you!" she hissed, tears now flowing freely. "I've seen the texts, Jack. The hotel receipts. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Jack's facade cracked. Anger flashed in his eyes as he leaned in close. His words meant only for Marta. "You want to do this here? Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with Vanessa. And you know why? Because she doesn't nag me. She doesn't make me feel trapped. She makes me feel alive." The venom in his voice shocked even him. He watched as something broke inside Marta, her face crumpling in pain and humiliation. Without another word, she turned and fled the ballroom, leaving behind a wake of stunned silence. As the gravity of what he'd done settled over him, Jack felt a hand on his arm. Vanessa stood beside him, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "Well," she purred, "I guess the cat's out of the bag." Jack stared after Marta, a hollow feeling growing in his chest. He'd won the battle, but at what cost? The sleek penthouse office overlooking Central Park buzzed with activity. Jack Sterling, now 42, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection a testament to his success. Designer suit, expertly coiffed hair, and a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. But the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Sterling?" His new assistant, a nervous young man named Tim, approached cautiously. "Your 2 o'clock is here." Jack nodded, turning away from the view. "Send them in." As he settled behind his imposing desk, Jack couldn't help but think about how much had changed in 4 years. His real estate empire had flourished, expanding into new markets and doubling in value. But the cost had been high. Marta had left him that night at the gala, taking with her not just their unborn child, but also a piece of Jack he hadn't known existed. The divorce had been messy, splashed across every tabloid in the city. In the end, Marta had walked away with a sizable settlement and sole custody of their daughter, Lily. A sharp knock at the door pulled Jack from his reverie. "Come in," he called, straightening his tie. Vanessa sauntered in, every bit as alluring as she'd been 4 years ago. The diamond on her left hand caught the light, a constant reminder of the choice Jack had made. "Darling," she purred, perching on the edge of his desk. "I've been thinking about the wedding. What do you say we move it up? Next month, perhaps?" Jack forced a smile. "Whatever you want, sweetheart. You know I'm leaving all the planning to you." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. But it would be nice if you showed a little more enthusiasm. After all, we've been engaged for over a year now." Before Jack could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his heart skipping a beat at the name displayed. Marta. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. "We'll talk about the wedding later, okay?" Vanessa's lips thinned, but she nodded, sliding off the desk and sashaying out of the office. Jack waited until the door closed before answering. "Marta? Is everything all right?" "Hello, Jack." Marta's voice was cool, professional. "I'm calling about Lily's school tuition. It's due next week." Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right, of course. I'll have the money transferred today. How is she?" A pause. "She's fine, Jack. She asked about you last week." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Jack swallowed hard. "I'd like to see her, Marta. It's been months. You know the arrangement, Jack. Once a month, supervised visits. If you want to change that, you'll need to go through the courts." Jack sighed, defeat weighing on his shoulders. "I know. I miss her." "You should have thought about that 4 years ago," Marta replied, her voice softening slightly. "I'll let you know when the money comes through. Goodbye, Jack." The line went dead, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. Across town in a modest but charming brownstone, Marta ended the call and let out a long breath. At 38, she wore the years well, her face etched with lines of determination rather than bitterness. "Mommy?" a small voice called from the living room. "Can we go to the park now?" Marta smiled, her whole demeanor softening. "Of course, sweetie. Let's get your shoes on." As she helped Lily, now a precocious 4-year-old with Jack's eyes and her curls, Marta reflected on the journey of the past 4 years. The pain of Jack's betrayal had nearly broken her, but she channeled that pain into something positive. With the settlement money from the divorce, Marta had founded New Beginnings, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting single mothers. What had started as a small support group now offered job training, childcare assistance, and legal aid to hundreds of women across the city. "Mommy, look!" Lily held up a crayon drawing. "It's you and me, and the ladies from your work." Marta's heart swelled with pride and love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. We'll hang it up in my office, okay?" As they left for the park, Marta caught sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror. Gone was the naive, trusting woman she'd been 4 years ago. In her place stood a woman of strength and purpose, her eyes clear and determined. She may not have the wealth or glamour of her previous life, but Marta had something far more valuable: the love of her daughter and the satisfaction of making a real difference in the world. And that, she realized, was worth more than all the penthouses in New York. The first hint of trouble came on a crisp autumn morning. Jack was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone began to buzz incessantly. Annoyed, he excused himself, only to find a barrage of missed calls and urgent messages from his lawyer, publicist, and CFO. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, dialing his lawyer's number. "Jack, thank God," came the harried voice of Alan Goldstein. "Have you seen the news? I've been in a meeting all morning." "What news?" "Turn on any financial channel. Now." With a growing sense of dread, Jack strode to the large screen on the wall and flicked it on. His stomach dropped as he saw his own face plastered across the screen, alongside bold headlines: "Sterling Enterprises accused of massive fraud," and "SEC launches investigation into real estate mogul's empire." "This can't be happening," Jack whispered, his mind reeling. Over the next few hours, the full extent of the scandal became clear. Anonymous whistleblowers had come forward with evidence of widespread embezzlement and unethical business practices within Sterling Enterprises. The SEC was launching a full investigation, and several high-profile clients had already announced they were severing ties with the company. As night fell, Jack found himself alone in his office, tie loosened, a glass of scotch in hand. The phone hadn't stopped ringing all day, but he'd stopped answering hours ago. His mind raced, trying to piece together how this could have happened. He'd always pushed the boundaries of what was legal, sure, but outright fraud? That wasn't his style. A soft knock at the door startled him. "I said no interruptions," he barked. "It's me," came Vanessa's voice as she slipped into the room. "I thought you could use some company." Jack eyed her warily. "What do you want, Vanessa?" She approached, her movements calculated and graceful. "I want to help, darling. We're in this together, remember?" She placed a hand on his shoulder, but Jack shrugged it off. "Are we?" he asked, his voice bitter. "Because I can't help but notice that your name isn't mentioned once in any of these reports. Convenient, isn't it?" Vanessa's eyes flashed dangerously. "What are you implying, Jack?" Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time the name on the screen made him pause. "Marta." "I need to take this," he said, turning away from Vanessa. "Marta," he answered, his voice softer than it had been all day. "I saw the news, Jack," Marta said, her tone unreadable. "Are you all right?" The question caught him off guard. After everything he'd put her through, she was asking if he was all right? "I've been better," he admitted. "It's a mess, Marta. I don't know how I'm going to fix this." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Maybe I can help." Jack blinked in surprise. "You? But why would you want to—" "Not for you, Jack," Marta clarified. "For Lily. Whatever happens to you affects her too. And, well, my organization has some experience dealing with legal and PR crises. We might be able to offer some guidance." For the first time that day, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. I don't know what to say, Marta. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "This isn't going to be easy." But if you're serious about making things right, I'll do what I can to help." As the call ended, Jack turned to find Vanessa watching him, her eyes narrowed. "What did she want?" Vanessa demanded. Jack straightened, suddenly seeing Vanessa in a new light. "She offered to help, which is more than I can say for you." Vanessa's face contorted with anger. "You can't be serious. After everything we've been through, you're going to turn to her." "I'm going to turn to anyone who can help me salvage this mess," Jack retorted. "And right now, that's Marta." As Vanessa stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt like he might be taking a step in the right direction. The next morning, as Jack prepared to face the media circus outside his building, his phone buzzed with a text from Marta. "Meeting at my office 2 p.m. Bring all relevant documents. We have work to do." Taking a deep breath, Jack straightened his tie and stepped out to face the world. The road ahead would be difficult, but with Marta's help, he dared to hope that redemption might still be possible. The offices of New Beginnings were a far cry from the opulent surroundings Jack was accustomed to. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork, clearly made by children, and the reception area bustled with activity. As Jack stepped inside, he felt distinctly out of place in his tailored suit. "Mr. Sterling." A young woman approached him. "Ms. Reeves is expecting you. This way, please." As he followed her down the hallway, Jack couldn't help but notice the looks of recognition, and in some cases, disdain, from the women they passed. His face had been splashed across every news outlet for days. There was no hiding who he was. The assistant knocked on a door at the end of the hall. "Ms. Reeves, Mr. Sterling is here. Send him in," came Marta's voice from inside. Jack stepped into the office, his eyes immediately drawn to Marta. She sat behind a modest desk, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, glasses perched on her nose. She looked different, stronger somehow. "Jack," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." As he sat down, Jack cleared his throat. "Marta, I want to thank you again for—" "Let's skip the pleasantries," Marta interrupted, her tone businesslike. "We have a lot to cover, and not much time." "Did you bring the documents I asked for?" Jack nodded, placing a thick folder on her desk. "Everything I could gather on short notice. Financial records, board meeting minutes, internal memos." Marta began leafing through the papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured. "Is it really that bad?" Jack asked, leaning forward. Marta looked up, her eyes meeting his. "Jack, there's clear evidence of financial mismanagement here. Whether you were directly involved or not, this happened under your watch. The SEC is going to have a field day." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "I don't understand how this happened. I trusted my team. That's the problem, isn't it?" Marta cut in. "You trusted the wrong people." Again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken history. Jack flinched as if he'd been slapped. "That's not fair, Marta," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" Marta's voice was sharp. "Your judgment has always been questionable when it comes to the people closest to you. Or have you forgotten that night at the gala?" Jack's jaw clenched. "I thought we were here to discuss the current situation, not rehash the past." Marta took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. "You're right. I'm sorry. That was unprofessional of me." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Finally, Jack spoke. "How's Lily?" Marta's expression softened slightly. "She's good, growing so fast. She asks about you sometimes." Jack's heart clenched. "I miss her, Marta, more than you know." "You have a funny way of showing it," Marta replied, but there was less bite in her tone now. "When was the last time you showed up for a scheduled visit?" Jack looked away, shame coloring his cheeks. "I know I've been absent. I want to do better. For her." Marta studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Well, let's focus on getting you out of this mess first. Then we can discuss your relationship with Lily." As they dove into the documents, working side by side to untangle the web of financial irregularities, Jack couldn't help but steal glances at Marta. Despite the tension between them, there was something comfortingly familiar about working together again. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, Marta leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. "I think we've done all we can for today. We'll need to bring in a forensic accountant to go through these in more detail. Jack nodded, gathering the papers. Marta, thank you for doing this. I know you have no reason to help me. Marta's eyes met his, a mix of emotions swirling in their depths. I'm not doing it for you, Jack. I'm doing it for Lily, and for all the women who depend on the donations your company makes to organizations like mine. If Sterling Enterprises goes down, a lot of innocent people get hurt. As Jack stood to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, Marta, I'm sorry. For everything. Marta's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Good night, Jack. We'll continue this tomorrow. As the door closed behind him, Jack felt a strange mix of hope and regret. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, he felt like he might be on the right path. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as Jack was leaving a grueling meeting with his legal team. Marta's name flashed on his screen, and he answered immediately, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Marta? What's wrong? Her voice came through, tight with worry. Jack, it's Lily. She collapsed at school. We're at Mount Sinai Hospital now. Jack's world tilted on its axis. What, is she okay? What happened? The doctors are running tests, Marta replied, her voice cracking. They mentioned something about her heart. Jack, I'm scared. Without hesitation, Jack was moving. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The hospital waiting room was a blur of activity, but Jack's focus narrowed to a single point. Marta, sitting alone in a corner, her head in her hands. As he approached, she looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Jack, she whispered, standing. For a moment, they stood awkwardly, years of hurt and mistrust creating an invisible barrier between them. Then, without thinking, Jack pulled her into an embrace. She'll be okay, he murmured into her hair. She has to be. Marta stiffened at first, then relaxed into his arms, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. The doctors said she might need surgery. Expensive surgery. Jack pulled back, his hands on Marta's shoulders. Money is no object. Whatever she needs, I'll make it happen. A ghost of a smile touched Marta's lips. For once, I'm glad of your ridiculous wealth. Their moment was interrupted by a doctor approaching. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling? Ms. Reeves, Marta corrected automatically. How is she, doctor? The physician's face was grave. We've identified the issue. Lily has a congenital heart defect that's gone undetected until now. She'll need surgery, and soon. Jack felt the floor drop out from under him. Surgery? But she's only 8. I understand your concern, the doctor continued. But this procedure is necessary. Without it, Lily's condition will only worsen. As the doctor explained the details of the surgery and the risks involved, Jack found himself reaching for Marta's hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. When can we see her? Marta asked, her voice small. She's being prepped for some additional tests, but you can see her in about an hour. I'll have a nurse come get you. As the doctor left, Jack and Marta sank into nearby chairs, still holding hands. I can't lose her, Jack, Marta whispered. She's everything to me. Jack squeezed her hand. We won't lose her. I promise you I'll do whatever it takes. For the next hour, they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jack's mind raced, thinking of all the times he'd missed with Lily, all the moments he'd taken for granted. He vowed then and there that when Lily recovered, he'd be a better father. He'd be present. Finally, a nurse approached. You can see Lily now. Follow me, please. As they walked down the sterile hospital corridor, Jack felt a surge of anxiety. What if Lily didn't want to see him? What if she didn't even recognize him? But as they entered the room, all his fears melted away. Lily lay in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile, but her face lit up when she saw them. Mommy! Daddy! She exclaimed, her voice weak but excited. Jack felt his heart constrict at being called Daddy. He moved to her bedside, taking her tiny hand in his. Hey, princess. How are you feeling? Lily's brow furrowed. My chest hurts. The doctor said I have to have an operation. I'm scared, Daddy. Jack exchanged a glance with Marta, who nodded encouragingly. He sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Lily's hand. "I know it's scary, sweetheart," he said softly. "But you know what? You're the bravest girl I know. And your mom and I, we're going to be right here with you, every step of the way." Marta joined them on the other side of the bed, smoothing Lily's hair. "That's right, baby. We're not going anywhere." As they sat there, united as a family for the first time in years, Jack felt a shift in the air. The walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble, replaced by a fierce determination to make things right. Not just for Lily, but for all of them. The days following Lily's diagnosis passed in a blur of medical consultations, sleepless nights, and tense conversations with doctors. Jack had practically moved into the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and subsisting on vending machine coffee. Marta, too, was a constant presence, her strength and composure a stark contrast to Jack's barely contained anxiety. It was on the 5th day, as they sat in the hospital cafeteria picking at unappetizing sandwiches, that their fragile peace was shattered. "Jack? Marta?" A familiar voice cut through the quiet murmur of the cafeteria. They looked up to see Vanessa standing before them, impeccably dressed and looking out of place among the haggard hospital visitors. Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Vanessa? What are you doing here?" Vanessa's eyes darted between Jack and Marta, a hint of jealousy flashing across her face. "I've been trying to reach you for days, Jack. Your office said you were here. I had to see for myself." Marta rose slowly, her voice cool. "This is hardly the time or place for a social call, Vanessa." Vanessa's lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, I think it's the perfect time. While you've been playing happy families, Jack, your empire has been crumbling. Or have you forgotten about the SEC investigation?" Jack felt a surge of anger. "My daughter is sick, Vanessa. Nothing else matters right now." "Your daughter?" Vanessa laughed, the sound brittle and harsh. "The one you've barely seen in 4 years? How convenient that you've suddenly remembered your paternal instincts." Marta stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "That's enough. You need to leave. Now." But Vanessa wasn't finished. She turned to Marta, her voice dripping with venom. "And you? So quick to welcome him back into your life. Have you told him about David? Or were you hoping to keep that little secret?" Jack's head snapped towards Marta. "David? What is she talking about?" Marta's face had gone pale. "This isn't the time, Jack." "Oh, I think it is," Vanessa pressed on, clearly relishing the drama. "David, Jack's former business partner, the one who's been seen coming and going from Marta's house at all hours. Quite the cozy arrangement, isn't it?" Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. He turned to Marta, his voice low. "Is this true?" Marta's eyes met his, a mix of defiance and guilt in their depths. "David has been helping me with some legal matters for the nonprofit. That's all." "That's all?" Jack's voice rose. "My former partner, the man who knows all the ins and outs of my business, has been helping you? While I'm being investigated by the SEC? "It's not what you think, Jack," Marta began, but Jack cut her off. "I trusted you, Marta. I thought we were finding our way back to something." Vanessa watched the exchange with barely concealed glee. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen. You know, Jack, it's not too late. Come back to the company. Come back to me. We can weather this storm together." For a moment, Jack stood frozen, torn between anger, betrayal, and the pull of his old life. But then, from down the hall, came a small voice. "Daddy? Mommy?" All 3 adults turned to see Lily standing in the corridor, her small frame dwarfed by the hospital gown, an IV stand clutched in her hand. In an instant, Jack's priorities crystallized. He brushed past Vanessa, moving swiftly to Lily's side. "Hey, princess, what are you doing out of bed?" Lily's lower lip trembled. I heard shouting, "Are you and Mommy fighting again?" Jack knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. "No, sweetheart. Everything's okay. We were just having a grown-up discussion." Marta joined them, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "That's right, baby. Let's get you back to your room, okay?" As they turned to lead Lily back, Jack glanced over his shoulder at Vanessa. "I think you should go now. And Vanessa, don't come back." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, Jack. When everything comes crashing down around you, don't come crawling back to me." But Jack was already walking away, his arm around Lily, Marta by his side. As they helped Lily back into her bed, Jack felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. "Marta," he said quietly, once Lily had drifted off to sleep. "We need to talk. About David, about the company, about everything." Marta nodded, her expression guarded but resolute. "You're right, we do. But not here, not now. Lily needs us to be united." Jack looked at his sleeping daughter, then back at Marta. "Agreed. Whatever happens between us, Lily comes first." As they settled into the familiar routine of their bedside vigil, Jack realized that the path forward wouldn't be easy. There were still secrets to uncover, trust to rebuild, and a long road of redemption ahead. But for the first time in years, he felt ready to face it all. Not for his own sake, but for the sake of the little girl who had stolen his heart all over again. The day of Lily's surgery arrived with a mix of trepidation and hope. As they waited in the pre-op room, Jack and Marta sat on either side of Lily's bed, both trying to maintain brave faces for their daughter's sake. "Remember, sweetheart," Marta said softly, stroking Lily's hair. "When you wake up, Mommy and Daddy will be right here waiting for you." Lily nodded, her small face a mixture of fear and determination. "Promise you won't leave?" "We promise," Jack said firmly, squeezing her hand. "We're not going anywhere." As the nurses came to take Lily to the operating room, Jack and Marta shared a look of understanding. Whatever issues lay between them, they would face them together, after their daughter was safe. The hours of surgery stretched on interminably. Jack paced the waiting room, while Marta sat still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Finally, as the tension reached a breaking point, Jack spoke. "Marta, about what Vanessa said." Marta looked up, her eyes tired but clear. "Jack, there's nothing going on between David and me. He's been helping with legal issues for the nonprofit, that's all, but..." She hesitated. "He did share some concerns about Sterling Enterprises, things that might be relevant to the SEC investigation." Jack felt a flicker of anger, quickly replaced by resignation. "I see. And you didn't think to tell me?" "I wanted to," Marta admitted, "but I wasn't sure how. We've been at odds for so long, Jack. And then Lily got sick, and suddenly none of it seemed to matter anymore." Jack nodded slowly, sinking into the chair beside her. "You're right. None of it matters compared to Lily." He took a deep breath. "Marta, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About the company, about my life, about everything." "What do you mean?" Marta asked, her brow furrowed. "I'm going to step down from Sterling Enterprises," Jack said, the words coming out in a rush. "I'm going to cooperate fully with the SEC investigation, take responsibility for any wrongdoing, whether I knew about it or not. And then, I want to do something meaningful with my life." Marta stared at him, shock evident on her face. "Jack, are you sure? The company is your life's work." Jack shook his head. "No, Lily is my life's work, and I've been neglecting her for far too long. I want to be the father she deserves, Marta. And I want to make amends. To you, to everyone I've hurt along the way." Tears welled in Marta's eyes. "Jack, I don't know what to say." Before she could continue, the surgeon appeared, still in his scrubs. Both Jack and Marta stood, hearts racing. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Reeves," the doctor said, a smile breaking across his tired face. "The surgery was a success. Lily's going to be just fine." The relief that washed over them was palpable. Without thinking, Jack pulled Marta into a tight embrace, both of them laughing and crying at once. As they broke apart, Marta looked up at Jack, her eyes shining. "You really mean it? About stepping down? About making amends?" Jack nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I do. I want to donate a significant portion of my shares to your nonprofit, Marta. And I want to be involved, really involved, in helping others. If you'll have me, that is." Marta's smile was radiant. "I think we can arrange that. But Jack, I need you to understand something. I'm not ready to jump back into a relationship. Too much has happened." Jack nodded, a mix of disappointment and understanding on his face. "I know, and I respect that. I have a lot of work to do to earn back your trust, and Lily's. I'm willing to take it one day at a time." As they made their way to the recovery room to see Lily, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. 6 months after Lily's surgery, the auditorium of PS 118 buzzed with excitement. It was the grand opening of the school's new STEM lab, funded in large part by a donation from the Sterling Reeves Foundation, the new charitable organization born from Jack's decision to step down from his company. Jack stood at the back of the room, watching as Marta addressed the crowd of students, parents, and teachers. She spoke passionately about the importance of education and equal opportunities for all children, regardless of their background. "And now," Marta said, her eyes scanning the room, "I'd like to introduce the man who made all this possible, Jack." As Jack made his way to the podium, he caught sight of Lily in the front row, beaming up at him. His heart swelled with pride and love. "Thank you, Marta," he began, his voice steady. "And thank you all for being here today. 6 months ago, I was a different man. I thought success was measured in dollars and cents, in the height of my buildings or the size of my bank account. But life has a way of teaching us what really matters." He paused, his eyes meeting Marta's for a moment before continuing. "Today I stand before you not as a businessman, but as a father, a friend, and hopefully a force for positive change in our community. This STEM lab is just the beginning. Together we can build a future where every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential." As the audience applauded, Jack stepped back, allowing the school principal to take over. He made his way to where Marta and Lily stood. "That was a great speech, Daddy," Lily said, wrapping her arms around his waist. Jack hugged her back, still marveling at how natural it felt now. "Thanks, Princess. I'm just glad you're here to see it." Marta smiled at them both. "You've come a long way, Jack. I'm proud of you." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Jack felt a flicker of the old connection between them. But he knew better than to push. They had found a new rhythm in co-parenting Lily and working together on the foundation. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest and real. As the ceremony concluded and people began to mingle, Jack found himself approached by a familiar face, David, his former business partner. "Jack," David said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you." Jack shook his hand, surprised by the lack of animosity he felt. "David, I'm glad you could make it." David nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "What you're doing here, with the foundation, it's impressive. I never thought I'd see the day when Jack Sterling became a philanthropist." Jack chuckled. "Neither did I. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" As they chatted, Jack noticed Marta watching them from across the room, a small smile on her face. He realized then that the jealousy and suspicion he once felt had faded. In its place was a sense of gratitude, for second chances, for new beginnings, and for the family he had nearly lost, but was now working hard to cherish. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of handshakes, conversations, and laughter. As the event wound down, Jack found himself standing outside the school with Marta and Lily. "Ice cream?" Lily asked hopefully, looking between her parents. Marta laughed. "I think we can manage that. What do you say, Jack? Care to join us?" Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest. "I'd love to." As they walked down the street, Lily between them, swinging their hands, Jack realized that this simple moment of family togetherness, was worth more than all the wealth and power he had once prized so highly. He didn't know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. He was exactly where he was meant to be. 1 year later, on a warm summer evening, Jack, Marta, and Lily sat around a picnic table in Central Park. The remains of a casual dinner were spread before them, and Lily was eagerly describing her latest science project. "And then, when you add the vinegar to the baking soda, it goes whoosh," Lily demonstrated with her hands, her eyes wide with excitement. Jack laughed, ruffling her hair. "That's amazing, sweetheart. You'll have to show us when we get home." Marta smiled, her eyes meeting Jack's over Lily's head. There was a warmth there, a comfortable familiarity that had grown over the past year. As Lily ran off to join a group of children playing nearby, Marta turned to Jack. "You know, a year ago, I never would have imagined us here like this." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Me neither, but I'm grateful for it, for all of it, even the hard parts. They led us here." Marta reached across the table, squeezing his hand briefly. You've changed, Jack. In all the ways that matter. We both have, Jack replied softly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily play. The foundation was thriving, making real changes in the community. Jack had found purpose in his new role, and Marta's nonprofit had expanded its reach. They weren't a couple in the traditional sense, but they had forged a new kind of family unit, one built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the love they both had for their daughter. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. The journey had been long and often painful, but here, in this moment, with the two people he loved most in the world, he knew that every step had been worth it. This was his redemption, his second chance, and he vowed to cherish it every single day. What did you think of Marta's story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.